Okay, good morning. I have just started recording. It looks like we have almost everybody here on the participants. Just wanted to reiterate, in case you just came on, that I can't hear you. You do have the ability to raise your hand. And I'm not sure if then I can take you off of mute or not, because this is my first time with a Zoom webinar. I've used it for lots of meetings and I really appreciate the platform. And so hopefully it will all work out well. The Dropbox is there in the chat box, and that is a link to the workbook, which is the companion to this webinar. It has everything in narrative form, so you may not want to follow along that way, but there are lots of questions that you can fill in the blank as I speak, or you can come back to later. And I would like to ask you to get out a pen and paper, because even though we aren't specifically interactive or face-to-face, I will have several things for you to jot down and encourage you to think about. So, sex sells and not price. An interesting fact, only 6% of all sales are based primarily on price. This means that 94% of all sales can be yours, even if you don't have the lower price. In my case, for example, I have a coaching practice and my coaching rates are higher than many other business coaches around, and I have no lack of clients. So how do I do this? Today we're going to focus on persuasion strategies, and that works for you whether your job is specifically sales or whether you have a position where you need to, quote unquote, sell up the ladder, meaning persuade people, or persuade people who work for you or underneath you to move forward in any different direction. Author Daniel Pink writes in the book To Sell is Human. He states that people spend 40% of their time persuading and convincing and cajoling others to part with their resource in order for what you're trying to do. So anytime you are trying to move people in any way, that's selling. That could be your children, that could be your spouse, that could really actually be trying to move the needle in terms of your particular sales. And so I have a question. Where's the workbook? Hopefully you can see in the chat box above, there is a Dropbox link, and I will share that again. Here's some information on Daniel Pink. And I'm back and grabbing that Dropbox link. You should be able to click through that and grab the workbook there. And there is that again. So here we are, FocalPoint. You might have heard of us before, perhaps you haven't, and just want to give you a little bit of information about FocalPoint as a whole. We are a franchise, actually. We're founded by Brian Tracy, who is a sales guru. He has been in the sales business for over 40 years. He's written more than 70 books, and he's trained thousands of people in the sales spectrum. So he is a proven space, and what it means to you is what we're going to discuss here isn't fluff, but 40 years worth of good and interesting information. And next here's me, I'm your coach, and I wish I looked like that this morning, and if I did, I'd probably have you on video, have me on video instead, but that's not quite as made up as that. I am a coach, I am a trainer, and I focus on building rapport and trust and closing more business. So our objectives for today. We have several objections here. We're going to talk about the definition and the value of persuasion. Now, the value of persuasion is probably fairly clear based on Daniel Pink's statement that 40% of our time is spent persuading people. That's interesting. I'm surprised it's that much. The next thing is that I want you to walk away with actionable and usable information. It's our objective that you are walking away from this webinar with something that you're going to take action on in the next 24 hours. There's nothing worse than spending an hour or a day on something, putting that information aside, and 3 days later you think you should get back to it, and 3 months later you forgot it happened. The next thing is we're going to talk about is strategies for success. I have 5 key strategies for success, and strategies for me are great because I don't have to think that through. I'm going to let you know what those are, and you hopefully can implement at least one of those, if not all of them. And then finally, we're going to define a method for placing your X. And I'm not sure if this is familiar to everyone, but Brian Tracy in his book called FocalPoint talks about this idea. So let's just say you're creating a new product or service and something is wrong. You're down for days because you can't find the problem. You're losing tens of thousands of dollars a day. And finally you say, you know what, I need an expert. I need somebody else who can come look at this and help me understand what's going on. So the expert comes in, she looks at your manufacturing plant or your code or your system, and after 10 minutes, she places a large X on one piece of the puzzle, one piece of equipment or one line of code or one space where your system isn't working quite right. You're relieved, you fix it, everything starts moving forward, and you're back online and in production. A week later, you get a bill for $10,000, and you are shocked. You call her and say, $10,000 for 10 minutes? And she says, hey, I'm happy to resubmit that bill for you. I'm sure that was probably pretty surprising. And along in the mail comes a new bill. It is $99 for 10 minutes of work, $9,901 for the expertise of knowing where to put the X. The X is your focal point, and you cannot move forward without a focal point. So your job today in this webinar is to start to think about where to put your X to move your sales or your persuasion to the next level. And here we have a great quote from Galileo. You cannot teach a man anything. You can only help him find it within himself. And as a coach, that's what I hope I do. So take out your piece of paper. I'd like you to write down some goals. When you write goals, you become more focused and you will be more observant in hearing how this information fits into your objectives. So please take a moment and do that. Feel free to type it into the chat box. If you do, I will share a couple. I can do that with or without a name, but I'd love to hear what your goals are for today. And we have a great quote here from Dave McNally about goals. He says, there's no guarantee of reaching a goal in a certain time, but there is a guarantee of never attaining goals that are never set. And if you want my white paper on the 10 goal method, please write goals somewhere in your feedback form. The feedback form is also in the Dropbox. And my goal for today is to get your feedback form. So I'm going to confess that this is my first webinar. I want to get better. Please don't be shy about helping me understand what's working and what's not working. And I will try to persuade you with tidbits along the way to some of your feedback form and make you some offerings, for instance, like my white paper on the 10 goal method. So let's talk a little bit about success. So we probably all know Andrew Carnegie. He commissioned a study on the attributes of success. He wants to know, what is it that makes people successful? This is a widespread study, and he came to this conclusion, they came to this understanding. He says that skills, 3 attributes of success. Skills is one, and knowledge is another. But the 2 of those only make up 15% of success. And so it's interesting to think about what is that 3rd attribute that really gives people success. Possibly not surprising, it's attitude. So my question for you is, when it comes to your sales or your persuasion, how is your attitude? How is it really? This includes your confidence and how you come across to your clients, because whatever your attitude is internally, whether you mean to or not, others know that. And the nice thing about attitude is that when you think of 10 people you know, especially the most successful 10, if you think about what comes across, you're going to think about attitude. And the nice thing is that most have learned that. And the good news is that it is actually learnable. So when we are trying to persuade people, we're really asking them to do something that's changing. David Gleischer developed this formula for change in the 1960s. And actually, the reality, he developed a slightly more complicated formula, and the next person who came along made it slightly more simple for us. And here's that simplified version. And it's great. There's only 4 aspects to this. And so we see it's an equation, 1 aspect on the right, 3 on the left. And on the right, we have resistance. And most people have a resistance to change. And especially if that change means writing a check or doing something significantly different than they've done before. When we look on the left-hand side, What overcomes resistance? Dissatisfaction is certainly one of the keys to overcoming resistance. The next thing is people need to have a vision, because you can be dissatisfied as you like or don't like. And if you don't understand that it actually could be different, there's no vision. So if they have dissatisfaction, they have vision, the next thing they actually need is first steps. And so in terms of your sales process or your persuasion process, if your product or service or the direction you want to go in moves an individual or a group from dissatisfaction by providing a vision and first steps, could you envision helping them through their resistance to parting with their money or moving in your direction? Your job as a salesperson, whether it's specific or implied, you need to know if the client has dissatisfaction and or vision. And this is really needs determination. It's also qualifying the prospect from a traditional sales perspective. So my encouragement is that you ask a lot of questions about their dissatisfaction and about their vision, because the reality is the individual only cares about their own position. They don't care if you make money or commission. They want to solve for their own dissatisfaction and fulfill their own vision. And if you can understand those better, you can talk better to how your product or service does that. So I'd like you to think a bit about your sales presentation. If you were to know the exact problem or dissatisfaction that needed to be solved, how would you present to your potential client or the person that you wanted to persuade? How could you match your product or service to their need? Would you talk about all the features that don't matter to them? Of course you wouldn't. You'd make sure that you are hitting hard and fast on the ones that actually fulfill their vision. So at any time, feel free to post questions or your thoughts in the chat box. I'd love to hear what you're getting from this. I encourage you to take a moment and jot down, is there something here that resonates in terms of your process in persuasion? So let's get into some meat here. I want to talk about the pillars of persuasion. This comes from an individual named Robert Cialdini, and he is a psychologist, and he wanted to know, what is it throughout history that people have used to persuade? Here is a link to his information. And he did not call these the pillars of persuasion, but they do seem to uphold persuasion. So we've presented them here in this format as actually pillars. So the first one is reciprocity. This is one of the oldest places that you can think about persuasion. I'll do something for you if you do something for me. Or really the other way around is, if you do something for me, I feel obligated to do something for you. It's kind of like, can you watch my bag while I use the restroom in the airport? Now you know when you come back, they can expect the same of you. This is a learned human behavior. And there's a great book out there called Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. He talks about about negotiation. And in negotiating, he says that reciprocity, just giving something very small, gives that next person the feeling of indebtedness. And so when I think about this, I think sort of just the smallest thing. If you are walking by a street musician and they have a little bucket or open instrument case, you feel obligated to stop and drop something at their side in the bucket. And sometimes you don't even really stop to listen to them. Maybe you feel a little bit uncomfortable, but they are providing something nice, and you go ahead and drop a dollar, drop your coins, and that's the law of reciprocity. So how do you parlay this in your sales process? If you have a question, write it down, and I'm happy to answer it now or later. And some of the ways that I use this in terms of reciprocity is just a small bit of information. I might send a note of congratulations to someone. I might say, I saw in the paper that your company received such and such award. And so when I run into that person or I call that person, they feel a little more indebted just based on a little bit that I gave to them. They naturally want to give back. So our next pillar of persuasion is commitment and consistency. It takes a lot of energy for people to make a decision, believe it or not. And so you're looking, again, for those little commitments, accepting your LinkedIn connection, agreeing to a call or a coffee, And this goes hand in hand with reciprocity. So when someone makes a little commitment to you, they're more likely to make the next commitment. It's easier to stay consistent with you than it is to start to make a commitment to someone else. And this comes in significantly in the buying process. Oftentimes you might hear to get 3 yeses in a row, and you want to offer something small in order for them to do that. Hey, is this still a good time for you? Yes. Are you still interested in moving? Is your project moving forward? Yes. Before you actually start to give them your product or service. The next pillar of persuasion is likability. Let's face it, when's the last time you bought anything from somebody that you didn't like? It's pretty rare. Even little things like a pack of gum, if the clerk is unlikable, you're just not going back. Our next pillar is social proof. And oftentimes nowadays, the first thing we think of in social proof is social media, but it goes well beyond that. What do other people think? It might be asking your brother-in-law, what restaurant does he like? Yelp is certainly bolsters that social proof because that is online social proof. But anybody else's recommendation plays into our understanding that something is worthwhile. Our next pillar is authority. And by this we mean being an expert and being a recognized expert. So as you think about your persuasion and sales process, how do you start to fulfill these pillars of persuasion? And where might you be missing out? So scarcity, we're all fairly aware of this. The supply is low. For me, my calendar fills up a week to a month in advance, and I'm happy to put you on it is one of the things that I tell people. And they're more likely to get on board with me sooner than later because my time is scarce. It's similarly when you look at the Sunday paper and you see a car for sale, it's at a great price, it's got everything you want in it, and they'll say 2 at this price. So they're creating scarcity. So putting all of these together makes you beyond persuasive. And we could spend a lot of time in these spaces, but I'd like you to just think about looking at these 6. Is there something you do very well? And is there something that you could do better or would want to drill down on further? The next thing I want to talk about is wealth building. And wealth building comes into play in sales. And this comes directly from a book by Brian Tracy called The Way to Wealth, which is why I have it listed that way. And there are 3 formulas in The Way to Wealth. The first is a customer formula. How many customers do you have? The second is revenue. How much revenue do you have? And the third is profit. How much profit? And today we're really going to just focus on these first 2, customers and revenue. If you want to know more about the profit formula, please put profit on your feedback form anywhere, and I will get that to you. So let's talk about the customer formula. The customer formula has 2 inputs and 1 output. The inputs are leads. How many leads is your marketing producing? And the next is conversion rate. In other words, from those leads, how many customers do you actually get? The percentage of people from the leads that you actually get. And the third is your actual number of customers. So if you, let's say, for example, have 500 leads in a year and your conversion is 20%, you would have, quite simply, 100 customers in a year. The next formula is our revenue formula. And this takes the number of customers from the customer formula and an average ticket price. In other words, what's your average sale? How many sales do you have in a period? Your period could be a month, it could be a year, it could be 2 years for your sales cycles. So how many sales do you have per period? And this will give you your overall revenue. So if your average ticket sale is $30 and you have 2 sales, let's say, per year, your revenue from these 100 customers is going to be $6,000. That's all well and good. And oftentimes you could think about that in terms of your commission if you are a salesperson. Maybe your commission is $30 per every customer. Either they buy from you twice a year. You're doing not as well as you might want to be doing based on this. Maybe this is your month instead, and that might look a little brighter, even better if it's your week. So how do we impact that? How do we increase each of those numbers? Well, if you're like many of the clients that I work with, they always want to have twice the revenue that they currently have. If they're making 10,000, they want to make 20,000. If they're making 100,000, they want to make 200,000, and so on. And so it's a little undaunting to think about doubling any of these. But if you, for instance, had 500 leads a year, that's about 42 a month. Let's just take a 10% impact, a 10% improvement. If you had 10% more leads every month, you'd have just 46. So could your team or could you handle 10% more in a given period? In my experience, it's a resounding yes. And similarly with conversion rate, if you're currently converting 20%, could you grow and learn to convert 22%? We aren't talking about doubling, we're really just talking about incremental growth. So what does that look like for you? If you now had 550 leads at 10% and you had 22% conversion rate, now you can have 121 clients. So that starts to look very interesting with just small incremental change. So you take those 121 clients in your revenue formula, or maybe this is your commission formula. If you just apply that to your average ticket sale of $30 and your average times of selling per period, you'd still be doing significantly better. And my invitation would be, what if you could also increase your average ticket sale by 10% and your number of sales per period by 10%? And so given that formula, bearing that out, now you're at almost 88,000. You're really at a 46% growth in revenue or commission if this is your structure. So in terms of growth, I really encourage people, especially in a sales position, to think about, and business owners, to think about it. It doesn't have to be overwhelming. Let's just eat the elephant one bite at a time. So now we're ready to get into the meat of selling on non-price issues. And by the way, if you have downloaded the PDF, this is the place where you could start filling in the workbook. If you would like the completed workbook and not have to put your answers in, please put answers on your feedback form, and I will send it to you at the end of this webinar. So let's talk specifically about selling on non-price issues. There's an entire industry of professionals who teach companies that sell expensive products and services how to position them against the competition. Top salespeople sell more expensive products and services, and they sell them all day long. So how do they do that? How do they get around price objection? So I want us to focus now on more ideas on how to get around non-price issues. And we're going right back to Gleischer's formula here. We're going to ask about vision and dissatisfaction. What is more important than price? What is more important than that resistance to relieve themselves of their hard-earned money? We know that price frequently arises early in almost every sales conversation. However, it's seldom the reason that people buy or refuse to buy. If price was the major reason for buying decisions, nothing of higher price or quality would ever be sold. No one would buy an expensive car, expensive watch, homes, clothes, etc. So we know that price is not really the key concern. The key for you in terms of your sales or persuasion is to find out what are the other things that people want when they're making decisions, and emphasize those in your conversation with clients and others. Now, the very best and highest price paid salespeople, people who sell on the basis of value, quality, and utility. This means higher value for the product. The better the quality of the product or service, the more useful, the more dependable, the longer it lasts, the better service they get from you as either a company, a client, or an individual employee or manager. The more you follow up, the better service. The company has a better reputation in the marketplace. All of these are non-price issues. They're decisions that people make to move forward, even though you may not have the lowest price solution. It's kind of interesting tidbit that every year companies advertise we have the lowest price. Every year they go bankrupt, and every year at higher levels. You see them go out of business at the lower price because they can't simply earn enough to stay in business. So don't get me wrong, price arises in almost every sale of importance, but price is an important issue and not the only issue. According to research, 94% of sales in America are determined on something other than price. So your job is to find out what those other issues are. And just as an aside hint, is this where you need to be thinking about putting your X in terms of your focus and your focal point in terms of changing your persuasion or sales strategy? Are you presenting the right things to the right people? So only 6% of sales are based solely on price, and these are for commodities, and even commodities can differentiate themselves. So if we look at this gas station, for example, we see 2 gas stations. You see this nice minivan turning the corner, and I see this regularly. I go by a corner where there are 3 gas stations, and I actually pick them not based on which one do I have a credit card for or which is the lowest price, but which one is most convenient to the direction I need to travel. And so this is a space where even a commodity can have a non-price differentiator. So I invite you to pause here and write down your 3 reasons your product, even if it's a higher price, would be superior to your competitors. Or if you're not selling a product, what it is that you're trying to get, why is price more important than the next lower price solution? Okay, so attributes that are more important to price. Let's look at these attributes that your buyer may find more important. The reason people buy primarily is due to 7 different attributes that they find more important, and let's talk about them. The first is quality. Quality means the stability of the product to the consumer. It means that the product or service that you sell conforms to the customer's standards and requirements. The second factor that's more important than price is delivery. They want fast, dependable, predictable delivery, consistently over and over again. This builds value. Think about, for example, Domino's Pizza. Tom Monahan, one of the richest men in America, started, I got ahead a little ahead of myself, sorry about that, started Domino's not offering the best pizza in the world. He said, I'm going to get it to you in 30 minutes or less. So his delivery was more important than his price or even his product quality. Another factor that comes up often in terms of more important than price is installation. And this comes up quite a bit in terms of technology. So installing the product with security, making it worry-free, and having a time saving is valuable to a lot of consumers or buyers. Installation, if it's easy and it's dependable, their controls can be more expensive if there's a guarantee or it's worry-free. I don't know if you've ever installed technology where you're really frustrated with trying to make the app do what it's supposed to do, or trying to make the technology software product work the way you think it will. You burn a lot of time just trying to make it work. So if your installation can be superior to that of your competitors or the alternatives, then you are moving forward. Next, you already got the sneak peek that our next attribute is service. So here in California, we have a crazy freeway system, yet people will go far for service. If they know that, for instance, a certain car dealership gives them great service, they'll make that drive, even though it's less convenient and it may or may not be the best price. Our next attribute is simplicity, making it simple. And one of those simple things is, in terms of sales in particular, is terms. And with that, simplicity may be in terms of down payments, simplicity of billing, preferable interest rates, making it easy for people to buy your product or service. And I'll give you an example. I recently updated the tech in my office. The gentleman whom I've bought from before came in. He recommended a system at $4,237. And I really wasn't interested in paying that much. So I said, hey, Cami, can you do something less? And he said, you know, Tonya, if I do something less, in the long run, you won't be happy with it. In a year, you'll be wishing you had something different. So he said, well, let's say we just do this high-end product and you'd pay me in 3 payments. I thought that was brilliant. And looking back, I literally didn't even ask for that lower price quote. And when he installed, I said, I kind of was chuckling at myself and said, tell me how you did this. And he said, I started doing this a little over a year ago and my sales went up 10 times. And it was great for me because I'm not pitching a lot of things that people aren't buying. I'm just trying to make it easier for them to buy from me and go with the higher price offering. And he said they really do get the better price offering. And he said, you know, not that the price is better, but they get what they need. And he said, I'd rather get what they need than in months or a year them say, you know, you sold me something that I really didn't need. So he's making it simple for that service and product for me. The next thing is support. And that we want to think about being trouble-free. Ownership shouldn't be hard for somebody. Once they buy from you, being able to guarantee that product unconditionally for a certain amount of time or maybe forever, we'll fix it, we'll repair it. If you have a problem, we will take care of it. People like to have that support. Thinking of support, I think about if you have to call Time Warner Spectrum, if you have a cable issue, you know you need to put aside an hour. It's terrible support in my experience. I hope I don't have anybody from Time Warner. If I do, I'm really sorry, and I'd love to talk to you about your customer support. I should have looked at that first. And in comparison, this Amazon Prime, I use Amazon for everything. If I get a product and there's a problem, there's live phone support. I can return it easily, and they follow up to see if I'm satisfied. That's great support. The next space is responsiveness. And so similarly to support, how responsive are you? And I'll tell you what people want. They want fast. They want fast response. They don't want to wait 2 days or 2 hours for support. So fast repairs, fast systems, regular callbacks. For example, I use this Zoom platform because with Zoom, they have 24-hour web assistance in the chat box. I've never had to wait ever. And if I'm distracted and I type them a question and I come back to that window later, they haven't disconnected me because they haven't seen me respond. They leave it open. And then when I'm done with getting what I need, they email me to see if I have what I need. And if I'm satisfied, they also inform my account rep so that she can contact me and see if I need anything more. It's super responsive. So if you're hitting in all these spaces in your sales process or your persuasion process, how important is price? I'd like you to jot down, if you can, 3 important attributes that are more important than your price and that are responsible for your sales against lower price competitors. And I always go in 3s. If you can't think of 3, write the number 3 down and start with number 1, and please try to get 1. So how do we lower price resistance? There are other values that the company creates as a result of marketing activities and individuals that lower price resistance. So here we're actually talking about perceived value. It may not be real value. It's what does the customer or client perceive as valuable? One of these instances would be high-level advertising. This increases the credibility and the perceived value of the product or service. Advertising is important because if a product is seen well and advertised well, people think it must be good. Many times people have a tendency to buy, for example, a name brand product over a no name brand product. Maybe it's the exact same thing in the bottle and we don't even know the difference. Advertising influences our perception of the value. A second marketing factor that lowers price sensitivity is an excellent reputation. So this goes back to social proof in terms of our pillars of persuasion. This increases the perceived value of what you sell. For example, why is Apple so successful today? It's because everyone talks about how good Apple products are. So people buy them and they pay very high prices for them and they don't even know if it's better or not. Just because it has a fabulous reputation, the reputation speaks for itself. We're assuming it's going to be a good product. There's another factor where marketing adds value to the product and lowers price resistance, and that's good public relations. And this means that the company has a good image, the company contributes or supports to worthy causes, the company has good sales material, good artwork, good brochures. This increases perceived value of the products or services offered. Another factor that increases value is excellent salesmanship. If you're in a company where they're hiring and training top people, that ability to create good relationships increases the value of what you sell. And oftentimes, this isn't about a sales process. This is really about the relationship. And I'll say most of the time, it's really about the relationship. And all the best companies hire really nice people and they train them very well in order to be good in sales. If you are in sales and you want to know more about how to strengthen and better deliver to your customers or potential customers, write styles on your feedback form. I have specific information I can share with you in terms of recognizing how to build those good relationships and other people's styles in order to get you the best relationship with individuals. So again, I'm going to ask you to jot down 3 ways that your company adds perceived value to your product or service, or how you do. What is it that you do differently that makes your product or service more desirable? So tactics that diminish price concern. You have to develop ongoing tactics for winning the price wars in your market. This means offering an easy, problem-free relationship. Here's a car buying situation. If you're like me, you've been through car buying situations that are less than problem-free. Haggling, the sales guys in and out of some manager's office, they write down a bunch of numbers. It's just yuck. And I like to imagine, and you can too, the painless, problem-free car buying experience. This is what Costco advertises. It's one price, that's it. People buy at Costco because there's a lack of problems. Does anyone even know if that's the best price you could get? I'm personally skeptical, but I think that the idea that it's problem-free gets people to the point where they don't even necessarily care if it's the best price. They just don't want to go through the rest of that problematic process. And so problem-free wins out. Number 2, you can emphasize your reliability and your dependability and the way that you do things quickly. Customers love it when you can do things fast. We've said this before. The best words you can use to increase your sales and your customer satisfaction are the words, sure, we can do that right away. If the customer says, I need this or I have this problem, you make sure it's taken care of right away. You call them back right away. You have someone sent out right away. You make sure that they get what they need in a fast, reliable, dependable way. This is tremendous for customers in a time where people are super impatient and we want everything done 3 minutes ago. Number 3, being consistent and predictable at all times. The most important value you can add is to offer consistent value, consistent quality, and consistent prices. Think about, for example, Walmart. It's one of the most successful retail businesses in history. Do they offer the best product? Maybe not. Why are they successful? It's because you know what to expect when you go there. Similarly, McDonald's. Is it great food or simply consistent? It's not great food most of the time. In my experience, you can eat better and sometimes for less if you eat at home. And so why do you go there? You go there because you're on the run and you know exactly what to expect. It's going to be predictable and consistent. It's going to be fast. So the next aspect of tactics that diminish price concern are just really having that ability to quickly react to the needs and concerns of your customers. So no company is 100%. And how do you react if something isn't quite right? If you can react quickly to customer concerns, you're going to build great loyalty. You cause them to come back over and over. If you react slowly to a customer concern, you reduce loyalty and often cause the customer to walk away and never come back. So giving a short delivery time and emphasize speed, it's absolutely amazing how many companies can just reorganize this small aspect and transform their business, delivering their product faster than anyone else does. Think about Amazon Prime. I love Amazon Prime, 2-day delivery. Who wouldn't want that? I don't even know if they're less expensive than anywhere else. I just know exactly what to expect. I know they're consistent. I know they're reliable, and it's problem-free. They're hitting on all the tactics. So Write down what 3 benefits do you offer that could emphasize to your potential clients the reduced price concern. What's that conversation look like? How do you employ that tactic? Continue on tactics. Another way to sell on non-price issues is to demonstrate your knowledge and competence. We're talking here about the authority pillar of persuasion. If you know more and are able to impart more about your product and service, or you're able to educate them, it helps your consumer to understand there's a higher value in buying from you than buying from someone else who may be less knowledgeable, who may be less of an authority. Be a consultant to them, be an advisor to your customer. You'll teach them how they can benefit. You're addressing here again their dissatisfaction and you're fulfilling their vision. This dramatically raises the perception of value and lowers the concern about price. Making yourself regular and predictable on your sales calls and your follow-ups. If you say you're going to be there or call them on Tuesday, do it. Once they buy from you, ask them, how often should you stay in touch? If they tell you they'd like to be called in a month, please don't call them in a week, and please don't call them in 2 months. Be on top of it, be predictable with your customers or your potential customers. Another thing you can do is to offer a total product or service line. We call this one-stop shopping. So if you offer the product, your product is office equipment, have it all. Be able to not only service desks and chairs, but also file cabinets, lighting fixtures, potentially have, if you don't have the ability to offer tech solutions, have a partner that can do that, somebody that they trust. Because again, once they commit to you, their commitment and consistency is going to continue, and they're more comfortable buying from you rather than trying to figure it out with somebody else. And then you always want to be prepared for explaining the exact reason for your prices. Some people will say, why does it seem to cost more from you and less from your competitor? Be ready to be upfront. Explain why you charge more. Explain the breadth and the depth of the quality of your service or product, and what is your result? What is it that they're going to get from you that they aren't going to get from somebody else? So what are the 3 benefits that you offer that emphasize, that you can offer to emphasize the price reduction of price concern in a sales conversation? Not the features and benefits to your client, but us actually solving his or her dissatisfaction or vision. How do you go with reliability, dependability, consistency in order to persuade in your direction? So let's talk about the preference categories. And preference is a really important part in this decision-making process in terms of buying. And part of this, the first and the most important, is personal preference. People pay more and value things that they like and feel better about, things that give them an experience, things that trigger emotions. Let's just take Disneyland, for example. It's the most expensive theme park in Southern California, but people go back dozens of times. Many go back multiple times a year. Why do we do this? It's because they know what to expect from Disney, and the reality is it's making their customers emotionally happy. It's providing an experience that doesn't matter about the cost. We do this in healthy times of economics, and we do this in down times. It's our splurge. And you could say the same for the Dodgers or the Lakers, right? Another type of preference is what is called operational preference. This is the impact of your product or service on the prospect's life or work. When you can show your product or service is really going to help the customer's lives be better, or help them do a better job, or be more satisfied. This is operational preference. The third type, can you hear my dog snoring? My apologies, I just heard him. The third type of preference is called functional preference, and that is, how does the product or service actually work? And what comes to mind for me is, here is remote controls for your television. It's a must-have if you're old enough, as I am, to remember when it was actually tethered by a wire to the television. Yes, remote controls were actually tethered. We didn't lose them then, and that was kind of a good thing. But we got the cordless, and not so long ago we got universal remotes, meaning no more remote for television, cable, sound system, etc. We got it all in one. And of course, now more recently, there's an app for that. We have apps that can not only control the TV and cable, they also control turning on the lights, the heat, turning on your hot tub. I can play music outside in my TV from inside on my phone, even if I'm not at home. And so for here, there's an interesting functional preference. Does that cost me more? Did I have to buy the new phone when that came out? It really did influence my decision to buy that phone sooner than later. So we have a few more preference categories in here. I'm sorry, I should have mentioned the last was in we were looking at a golf store, and if you are a golfer, you may have a particular preference for a Ping or Callaway or something different. And if you are a clothes shopper, you can see the sheer number of jeans available and t-shirts, and who knew there are that many different types of jeans. So where the preference goods come in? And I think many golfers and many folks buying jeans would say that the result needs to be tangible. So if it fits well and you feel good in it, the result is you're actually getting what you want. So with the result preference, in other words, what does the customer get when they use the product or service? If you can get the result that people want, you look good, you feel good in those jeans, they're going to buy them even if they're more expensive, and they're going to buy that product again and again. Another factor is in preferences is what we call the preference. Is the unique selling proposition. Specifically, what your customer is going to remember is special about the product or service that makes it different or better from anybody else in the marketplace. And it makes it much more desirable to buy, dramatically reducing price sensitivity. So Brian Tracy has a story about a friend who was looking to buy a car, and he test drove several cars, and he came across a Lexus, and he was really thinking about buying a different car. And the salesman asked him, how important is music to you? And this individual happened to love music. He's an avid concert goer, and especially orchestra music. And the salesperson said, you know, this car has an 8-speaker system, and when you sit in it, with the doors closed, it sounds like you're sitting in a symphony orchestra at a theater. The guy was a little taken back, a little skeptical, and the salesperson got out a piece of classical music, put in the CD at the time, and closed the doors and allowed the individual to listen. And really, the music was beautiful. And so he ended up buying this car at $65,000 when he could have bought a $35,000 or $45,000 car. Instead, he bought this Lexus simply because he was able to have the experience of the music system. And I could tell you, I had a Lexus, I don't now, but when I did, I had the high-end music system, and it really was amazingly wonderful to listen to music in that car. So there's also a comparative preference, and that's the way you position your product or service against your competitor that makes your product or service look superior. And finally, there's just a price preference, the meaning of the cost relative to other things available. Yes, Mr. Customer, you could buy a lot of different things, or you could buy other products, but look what you get with the money you spend here compared to how you'd spend it someplace else. So do you have 3 looking at these 7 that really resonate for you, or maybe 1 or 2 where you need to think about positioning your product or service or your persuasion that you're after in a different direction? So finally, we have perception, and that's a bit of what we're talking about. Your clients may perceive that an iWatch is superior, or they may perceive that a Rolex is the right thing for them. Significantly different. And how do you position yourself in this respect? How aware are you of their preference? Price is a function of the desire for what you're selling. If people really want what you have, really need it, or they understand the benefit, their price sensitivity goes down. So the key is to focus on areas where you can win against your competitors. Focus on things that your product or service offers that create far greater value in your customer's mind and lower that price sensitivity. Your job in the sales conversation or the persuasion conversation is to shift the focus of attention off price and onto specific values and attributes that your product or service offers to the customer. Most sales are not made on the basis of price alone. So your job is to find out what they are and emphasize them throughout the sales conversation. In other words, why are they really buying? So we've already actually gone through these questions, but they all apply to your sales activities and your thought process. If you have your PDF, it's actually the 9th page. And my apologies that there aren't page numbers, but you can turn to that 9th page of the PDF. And we've really actually answered all of these questions as we've gone along. But this is a space for you to answer them all in one place. So we talked about 3 reasons why your higher priced product or service is superior to a lower priced competitor. This is the game of inner selling. Number 2, what are the 3 most important attributes that are more important than price, and that are more responsible for your sales against lower price competitors? Next, what 3 values does your company create or offer that add to the perceived value of your product or service? What is it that you do differently that makes your product or service more desirable? Continuing, again, we answered all these earlier, but this is one space for you to put them all down. What are the 3 activities you could engage in to increase the perceived value of your products or service? Further, what 3 benefits do you offer that you can emphasize to reduce price concerns in a sales conversation or persuasion conversation? What are the 3 most important preference categories to your customers in determining their decisions? And finally, what 3 ways can you better position your product or service against the competition to make your product or service appear more attractive and valuable to your customers? A lot of questions there, and you may not have 3 for each. My encouragement is to spend some time thinking those things through, and you can't do them all. Don't expect to do them all today or even tomorrow. My encouragement is, where do you need to move the needle? Where are you already great? I'm always big on what do we do really, really well. Let's emphasize that. And let's look at the opportunities and say, what's the biggest opportunity for increased relationship, increased sales, increased satisfaction? So finally, what are the actions you're actually going to take immediately as a result of this talk? What can you do to focus on non-price issues in the sales or persuasion conversation? Brian Tracy says, a clear vision backed by definite plans gives you a tremendous feeling of confidence and personal power. So on this same sheet of paper, please write down your 3 actions that you can and will complete today. Benjamin Franklin, one of my favorites, says failing to plan is planning to fail. And we in Ventura would attribute that to somebody else. So my way of saying thanks for you coming today and for returning the feedback form to me is I'm happy to give you a copy of today's recording, and also to give you any other materials you're interested in. A couple of things we talked about were in terms of if goal setting is of interest to you, I'm happy to share my 10 goal white paper. If you just write goals, and these words aren't magic, so whatever it is that gets you to what you have a question for, please write it down. If you're interested in more information about success and attitude, write success, and I will send you Brian Tracy's ebook, Change Your Thinking, Change Your Life. If profit is of interest to you, write profit, and I'm happy to share more information about how to increase your profit in terms of the profit formula, and in that same space in terms of the way to wealth overall, the 3 formulas. If you write W2W or way to wealth on your form, I will send you Brian's workbook on wealth building in an incremental way. So there's my email address. It's also on the form. I will email you the form as well. I did provide it in the Dropbox, but if email is easier for you than Dropbox, then I'm happy to provide it in that way. And happy to answer questions at any time. And I look forward to seeing you on the next webinar. Thanks for coming and have a fantastic Thursday.